we're also following the developments out of the Middle East, where, as you know, Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a peace deal after more than 2 years of war. This is expected to lead to the release of all hostages and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. For more on this, I'm joined by CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Kealy. Courtney, earlier I was speaking with our Haleyad about the reaction in Israel, but reaction there in Gaza, let's talk about that. What are they saying?
Well, there were celebrations when the news broke. In fact, I spoke to a family in Gaza last night to see how they were doing, and they said there was a real adrenaline rush, celebrations, tears, and exhaustion. They said they're exhausted by 2 years of war, but they want this to end. And really, over and over again, it was, I hope, we're hopeful, we're hopeful. Now, they were living in a tent. They still are. They want to get back to northern Gaza. They're now in southern Gaza and displaced. But real happiness. And I'll have to, interestingly enough, I had that conversation in darkness because their battery of their flashlight had already worn out. So terrible conditions, but real hope. It's fingers crossed everywhere, Vlad.
Yeah, and this first phase is a critical one because it will mean finally that those hostages are coming home, and it will mean that those aerial bombardments are for now going to stop. The President of the United States has indicated that he wants to help rebuild Gaza to make it better than it was before. But there is one major sticking point, which is Hamas, at least thus far, has not agreed to disarm. And so for the Israelis, you run the risk of allowing this terrorist organization to hold on to their weapons, which means potentially we could be back, maybe not at the same level that we are now, but we could see a situation where Israel and Hamas go to war once again.
Well, Vlad, the terrorism ideology could live on, not necessarily in Gaza, but outside of Gaza as well. But the disarmament of Hamas, the disintegration of Hamas, militants on the ground, fighters on the ground, terrorist leaders on the ground, that's the significant change. So you had Hamas leaders in Sharm el-Sheikh, the top negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, who his hotel was bombed by the Israelis just a few weeks ago. He was in the negotiations. Now, do they speak for the Hamas Gazans? They do. They made this deal. It's establishing quickly a rule of law, getting those hostages released, but then what happens for the disarmament of Hamas? And the big players that are going to we have to see if they can continue this full court press are the Qataris and the Egyptians and the Turks. And they really played a big role in this, too.
Yeah, you heard, I don't know if you heard earlier from our Haleyad, who was in Hostage Square. She asked an Israeli citizen who lost a family member when Hamas entered into Israel and killed his cousin, say that only, in his mind, President Trump could bring together all these different actors, where you're talking about the Qataris, you're talking about the Egyptians, you're talking about the Turks, along with the Israelis, along with representatives of Hamas, to try to push this deal over the finish line. And you and I are old enough to remember the past attempts by former presidents of the United States to do something similar. Didn't always work out with Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat, and you'd have to go back, I keep suggesting, to Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat and President Carter getting that landmark peace agreement signed between Egypt and Israel. And so this is sort of a remarkable thing. And I wonder how people in Gaza, I heard some very laudatory points made about President Trump from that Israeli man, but I wonder if in Gaza people feel the same.
Well, the family I spoke to, and this will be music to President Trump's ear, he says, I want him to get the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, the messaging in Gaza, they have access to the internet when they have electricity. They follow this closely. They know what President Trump has said and what he's been able to achieve here throughout all of these relationships. And, when we talk about Bill Clinton in 2000 and Camp David, that was Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak, and Yasser Arafat. It wasn't this full court press of an empowered and wealthy Gulf states. It was a completely different trajectory. A few years after that, it was a top Saudi leader that had offered up a good peace deal, but it really never got off the ground. And so we did see the lasting peace with Jordan and Egypt. This can happen, but the rebuilding, everything that has to happen now, well, let's just wait and see what the next couple of days brings and where we go from there, Vlad.
Yeah, it would be music to President Trump's ears. I think that the Nobel Committee has already decided the prize for this year, but if this peace is lasting and it holds, there is always next year. A lot of people are suggesting the same. Courtney Kealy for us. Thank you very much, Courtney, as always, my friend. Appreciate it.